have time for, but anyone else who has additional questions, feel free to contact her directly. We'll now be turning over to our next presenter, Mary McMurray with FDEP.
Hello, everybody. This is Mary McMurray. I'm with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection with the Charlotte Harbor Aquatic Preserves. And today I'm going to be presenting on our wading and diving bird nest monitoring and protection program. Next slide. A little background about the Charlotte Harbor Aquatic Preserves. There's 41 aquatic preserves in the state of Florida, and our office manages 5 of these aquatic preserves. The CHNEP protects more than 180,000 acres of submerged lands and coastal uplands, and the aquatic preserves were set aside by Florida legislature to be maintained in essentially natural condition for future generations to enjoy. This is all outlined in Chapter 1820 Florida Administrative Code. Today I'm going to be focusing on Pine Island Sound Aquatic Preserve, which will be celebrating its 50th anniversary of designation in December of this year. So look for events for us to be celebrating that at the end of the year. Next slide. So the Colonial Wading and Diving Bird Nest Monitoring and Protection Program began in 2008. We partnered with Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge, and we identified islands that were either active nesting sites or historical nesting sites. We began visiting these nesting sites monthly and began collecting nesting effort on each of the islands. With that being said, each island was circled slowly and we counted each nest, all the species on the island. All of this data was then compiled and published in the South Florida Wading Bird Report. This season, we're currently in our 13th monitoring season. Next slide. So CHNEP and Ding Darling began surveying in 2008, and we started out very small. We were only looking at about 8 or 9 islands, and since then we have expanded to 38 islands. The map that you are seeing is depicting which islands are monitored by which agency. So because the survey area was so large, we split the survey area. The North Lemon Bay, Charlotte Harbor, and Upper Pine Island Sound, Matlacha Pass are monitored by CHNEP, and Ding Darling staff monitors the lower Matlacha and Pine Island Sound. Some of these islands are state-owned and some are federally owned, so we take that into account, but we all compile all of our data. Monthly surveys are conducted by boat. So we have a boat captain, we have a data recorder, and we have 2 observers, a primary and a secondary. Nests are recorded as unknown, incubating, or chicks. So it's unknown if there's a bird standing on a nest, we can't see chicks, we can't see eggs, or if they're in incubating position where they're crouched down on the nest, or if we see chicks on the nest. Those are the different nesting stages that are recorded. We also record any human disturbance, any bird fatalities, or any other notable observations. Next slide. So in 2016, Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission began looking throughout the state for areas where they deemed needed extra protection. So 2 of our islands in our study area were selected to be established as critical wildlife areas. They were established in 2016 and they were posted in September of 2017. These 2 islands are both located in Pine Island Sound Aquatic Preserve. One of them, Broken Islands, is closed seasonally, and then Hemp Key is closed year-round. Hemp Key is closed year-round because it has nesting activity year-round. All of these sites, both of these sites, are nesting sites for state threatened and imperiled species. They're important roosting sites for winter species, white pelicans and white pelicans specifically, the winter species, and magnificent frigate birds. As you can see in the photo, this is a congregation of white pelicans during the winter at Hemp Key, And we typically see about 400 to 500 white pelicans congregate here. We do document those numbers each month as well, an estimate. In 2019, the total peak nesting effort for these two islands combined, taking into account, this is from all 38 islands, these two islands represented 39% of all nesting effort. Next slide. So this is a graph of each species peak nesting effort from 2009 to 2019 on Broken Islands. It's important to note that 15 species are using this island as a nesting site. So it's very diverse. It houses state threatened birds, little blue herons, reddish egret, roseate spoonbill, tricolored herons, and state imperiled species such as brown pelicans and white ibis and snowy egrets. All of these birds have species action plans outlined in the FWC Florida Imperiled Species Management Plan. Next slide. And this is a graph of all of the nesting effort through 2009 to 2019 for Broken Island. So every species tallied up. Jeremy Conrad, senior biologist for Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge, has put together this data for us. And he's looked at all of the islands throughout the study period, but this island in particular, you can see there's not a significant trend, but it does average 222 nests. And it does also provide a large brown pelican nesting site. Next slide. This again is a graph of Hemp Key, and it provides a nesting site for 12 species, and it does provide a large site for brown pelican colonies as well. Next slide. Again, we graphed all the nesting effort on Hemp Key from 2009 to 2019, and this island averages 283 nests. Next slide. So in addition to looking at the nesting effort on each of these islands that we monitor every month, we also provide protection for these wading and diving birds. After each nesting season, typically October, November, we go out and we go around the island and we pull out all the fishing line and marine debris. In the bottom left picture, you will see CHAP staff. They're actually untangling a great blue heron from fishing line. And a lot of times we just happen to be in the right place at the right time. So just having the presence of going out once a month, we have been able to rescue many of these birds. Our staff is highly trained and skilled in going in quickly and being able to rescue these birds. If you see on the top left picture, that is the same bird that is able to fly off and be safe. And the bottom right picture, this is actually a brown pelican that had succumbed to red tide illness. So we have been able to do much effort in rescuing these birds as well. And we have great partnerships with Peace River Wildlife and Venice Wildlife Center. It's been a great partnership because we're able to just call them while we're out on the water, and they meet us on site at marinas, and they have crates already there for us to place the bird in, and they get there quickly and are able to take them back and get them treatment. We do provide education and outreach at events, and we also provide eco tours out of Lemon Bay Aquatic Preserve, where we can take guests and take them to some of these islands, giving them binoculars and having them with our observers and teaching them about the importance of birds and their importance to the estuary as they are a keystone species. And finally, the establishment of a critical wildlife area is important because it's an added layer of protection against human disturbance and giving these birds an opportunity to raise their young and be more successful at that. Next slide. In conclusion, we feel this program is important because we are protecting state threatened and imperiled species. We're going to continue to provide a long-term data set, and we're going to look at population trends and biodiversity on these islands, and even seeing spatial shifts with these wading and diving birds in the Charlotte Harbor area. The initial trend that Jeremy has done has shown that the nesting effort has been relatively stable over our study period, and we hope that continues, or if not, get better. We're going to continue to monitor efforts and provide the habitat protection and keeping these islands clean and keeping these birds safe and ensure the protection of the wading and diving bird species. And we want to reduce threats from human disturbance and from storms and sea level rise and climate change. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I think I was just at 10 minutes.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Mary. Now we're going to go over to Minty. And those of you online or watching us through YouTube, if you wouldn't mind logging into minty.com and using the code at the top of the screen. I see we already have some questions. So
we
Mary,
do. I'm looking
like
at the, sorry, Jennifer. Yes, I'm looking at the question about drones. We have considered doing that. I believe there was a person at Ding Darling that was getting his license to do some drone work. We're delving into that, but we're also considering other methods, such as we just started doing flight line surveys at Broken Islands because we have a huge white ibis population that we know we're not detecting using our methods. So we are seeing that we're missing some of these interior nesting birds. All right, let's see. How does shift in Pirate Harbor Shoal Islands impact bird nesting occurring there? What about fishing there? Are we referring to Pirate Harbor in Charlotte Harbor? Because we do monitor those islands. I don't really know how to answer that question. I'm going to go to the next question. Do you see overall species nesting shifts, perhaps in response to climate change? We really aren't there yet. We have, 10 years worth of data is the minimum that you need for like population trends. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're getting there. Jennifer, can you read the question to the far right? Okay, I see it. What might explain the downward trend in nesting at Hemp Key? Are there any major disturbances or issues on that island? I think the main issue is habitat loss. We have seen after Hurricane Charlie, there was a lot of mangrove loss, and I think we're seeing more and more of that. There is a oyster and mangrove planting, oyster restoration, excuse me, and mangrove planting that is going to be happening on that island. SCCF has a grant and is working on that. So I think that'll help. And as well as the CWA establishment will help too, reducing human disturbance. Sea level rise certainly is going to impact Rookery Islands because we're going to see habitat loss. And that's something that we are going to have to address. Can we obtain signage for designated bird nesting areas? So signage on islands has to be established through Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission because it has to have that regulatory component where it's enforceable. Oh, okay, burnt store shoal islands. Okay, so burnt store shoal islands, those are actually spoil islands. So they were created when they dredged the channel. To be honest with you, the burnt store islands, we've actually seen an increase in interior nesting this year. So it's actually been quite a good nesting site for Charlotte Harbor.
Well, great. Thank you, Mary. That's all we're going to unfortunately have time for right now. But again, if anyone has the questions that didn't get answered, feel free to contact Mary directly with her information and the proceedings. One